The bedroom is enormous, too quiet for two. Rain hits the floor-to-ceiling windows hard enough to sound like static, like the city itself is trying to drown something out. On her side of the bed, Doris lies with her back to the center, natural hair still wrapped, 20 years old, 4,000 miles from everything she has ever known. Her body is rigid, not relaxed, still. The specific stillness of someone whose muscles are doing work to stay that way. She stares at the wall like it owes her something. On his side, Kang Tae-jin lies with his eyes open, still dressed from the waist up. A man who has survived 3 assassination attempts does not undress completely in a room with someone he does not yet trust. Not out of fear of her, but out of a discipline so old it has become reflex. He has learned in 7 days that looking at her changes nothing. She does not look back. The distance between them could fit a third person comfortably. Neither has crossed it, not once. It has been 7 days. The silence has a pulse to it now. The specific pressure of 2 people lying 4 feet apart who have run out of reasons not to speak and have not yet found a reason to. Then, his voice, low, each word set down like a man testing ice before he puts his weight on it. Am I really that difficult to live with? Doris keeps her eyes on the wall. No. The rain answers for both of them, harder now. Several moments pass, long enough that the silence almost wins again. Then, quieter, not smaller, just closer to something true. Then why do you look at me as if I don't exist? She doesn't turn, doesn't shift, doesn't give him even the outline of her face. She stares ahead, like the answer is written somewhere in the dark, and she is deciding, right now, in real time, whether to read it out loud or let it stay where it is. Then, quietly, without cruelty, without apology, without even a tremor, because, a breath so small it barely moves the air, you can't make me feel anything. The room goes still in a way that has weight to it. Gangsters have pointed guns at Kang Tae-jin, politicians have betrayed him. 3 different men, on 3 different occasions, have tried to put a bullet in him and failed. He has sat across tables from people who wanted him dead and given them nothing, not a flicker, not a tell. None of it has ever landed like those 7 words. He says nothing. She doesn't move. The rain keeps falling. And somewhere underneath the silence, though neither of them says it, though neither of them will say it for a long time, something has already started. A debt has been named, and debts, in this house, are always repaid. 6 months earlier, South Bay, Florida. She had no idea any of this was coming. If you are new here, welcome to Soul and Soil Stories. We tell the stories that deserve every minute it takes to tell them right. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story is going to ask something of you before it's done. And if you've been here before, drop a comment right now. Tell us, would you have walked into that office in Los Angeles? Because Doris didn't think twice. You might. The Memorial Regional Hospital Emergency Department at 7 in the evening was organized chaos. The kind that looked like pure disaster to anyone walking in from the outside, and looked, to the people who worked inside it, like a system under pressure that was holding. Barely, but holding. Carts moved. Monitors beeped. Curtain 3 contained a 62-year-old man who was loudly insisting that the cut on his arm did not require stitches, and who was wrong about this. Curtain 7 had a child with a fever of 104 who had stopped crying approximately 40 minutes ago, which was actually the more concerning development, and Doris Paulman was already moving toward Curtain 7 before the attending had made it back from the supply room. She was 20 years old, pre-nursing clinical student, the kind of person who steadied a room simply by walking into it, not because she was loud or forceful or particularly large, but because she moved with the specific purposefulness of someone who always knew what the next 3 things needed to be. She had already, in the last 4 hours, restocked the supply cabinet before anyone asked her to, talked a terrified 7-year-old through a blood draw, using a story she invented on the spot about a superhero who was afraid of needles, reminded the attending physician about a medication interaction she had noticed in a chart, eaten exactly half a granola bar because there had not been time for the other half, and located a Haitian Creole interpreter for a family in waiting who had been there for 2 hours without anyone realizing the communication gap. Her supervising nurse, Patricia, 22 years of emergency medicine, seen approximately everything, impressed by approximately nothing, watched Doris manage Curtain 7 with the specific, unhurried competence of someone who genuinely cared rather than someone performing care. She turned to a colleague and said quietly, "That one is going to be exceptional." Doris did not hear this. She was already 3 steps ahead. Her shift ended at 8. She walked out through the sliding doors into the Florida evening. Thick air, orange sky going purple at the edges, the particular smell of a hospital parking lot, which is antiseptic, and asphalt, and the ghost of 1,000 cigarettes smoked at the exact edge of where smoking was technically not allowed. She called her father from the parking lot. "Dad, Dee, how was your shift?" "Long. How are you feeling?" "Fine, fine." He always said fine. He had been saying fine since her mother died, and fine was what he called the entire range of human experience that he did not want to discuss. "Did you take both blood pressure medications this morning?" A pause. "Dad, I took one." "Which one?" Another pause. "This one longer, the white one," he said finally. "Dad, they're both white, the round one." She pinched the bridge of her nose. "Take the other one right now, while I'm on the phone." The sound of a cabinet opening. "Water running." "Done," he said. "Thank you. I'll call after dinner. Love you." "Love you, Dee. Eat something. You sound like you forgot to eat again." "I had a granola bar. Half a granola bar. I know you." She was almost smiling when she hung up. Got in the car, pulled out of the parking lot. 11 minutes to drive home. She spent 9 of them running mental calculations. The co-pay for her father's next cardiology appointment, the tutoring shift Thursday that would cover it if she moved the electric bill to next week, whether she could pick up an extra clinical hour Friday, or whether she needed Friday to finish the pharmacology paper that was due Monday. She was 20 years old. She had been running these calculations for 2 years. She was very good at them. She turned onto her street and saw Elijah sitting on the front steps. She knew before she parked. Just from the shape of him, the specific collapse in his shoulders, the way his head was bent, the way he looked up when her headlights swept across him. The guilt on his face was so total, it was almost structural, like it had weight, like it was holding him down. She parked, got out, walked to the steps without hurrying, and sat beside him. He didn't speak for a long time. She let the silence be there. She was good at that too. "Dee," he said finally, "I need to tell you something." "Okay, you have to hear all of it before you react." "I'm not going to promise that." "Dee, talk, Elijah." He talked. It came out in pieces. The way confessions come when the person delivering them is also processing the fact that they have to deliver them. 8 months ago, he had joined an investment network. He explained how it had been presented to him, the legitimacy of the early returns, the way the platform communicated, professionally, specifically, with documentation that looked real because it mostly was real, at least on the surface. He had put in $2,000, then 5, then 10. He told her about their father's medical bills, the second mortgage on the house. This was the part where Doris went very still, because she had not known about the second mortgage, and the knowledge of it settled into her understanding of everything, like a stone dropping through water. He told her about the returns coming back, the account balance doing things he had never seen a bank account do, the feeling of it, the specific euphoria of watching a number grow, of believing that the problem was finally, for once in his life, getting smaller instead of larger. He told her about the collapse. He told her what the platform actually was. Korean Mafia, one of the old families. The platform was a laundering operation, cryptocurrency investment as cover for moving money between Asia and the United States. He hadn't known when he joined. He swore it. He had found out 3 months ago, when someone in the network, spooked by something, had sent a document to several members that explained what was actually happening, and then disappeared before anyone could respond. 3 months, Doris said. Yes, you've known for 3 months. I was trying to find a way to fix it, without telling me. I didn't want to worry you. She looked at him. Elijah. Her voice was very quiet. I have been managing Dad's medications and calculating whether we can afford his cardiology appointments and working 12-hour clinical shifts and doing it all without telling you how close some of those months were, because I didn't want to worry you. He said nothing. We need to stop not worrying each other, she said, because we are both drowning separately and calling it protection. He nodded. Once, the nod of someone who knows they are being told a true thing. How much? She said. He couldn't look at her. Elijah. $4 million. The number landed between them, like something dropped from a very great height. Not their money, the syndicate's money, $4 million that Elijah had lost in a platform he had not fully understood, belonging to people who had not asked for his understanding, only for their money back. They found me this morning, he said. 2 men. They were very polite about it, which I think was worse than if they hadn't been. They gave me 72 hours. To do what? Return the money. Or, he stopped. Or what? He looked at her. She understood. She stood up. Go inside, she said. Don't call anyone. Don't go anywhere. Do not do anything until I tell you to. Dee, what are you? Go inside, Elijah. He went inside. She stood on the front steps for a moment, looked at the street. A neighbor's dog was barking somewhere. The Florida evening continued around her with complete indifference, which was something she appreciated about the natural world. It never pretended that your personal catastrophe was relevant to the larger operation. She went to her room, sat at her desk, opened her laptop. She typed the name of the organization Elijah had described. Then, the name that had been delivered to him that morning, along with the 72-hour deadline. The name attached to the face, attached to the signature, on the final warning, Kang Tae-jin. She read for 2 hours. The legitimate version first. Chairman of Kang Industries, a multinational holding company with divisions in logistics, security, real estate, and biomedical research. Board member of 3 international foundations. Photographed at government functions in Seoul, Tokyo, Singapore, and Washington. A face that communicated nothing, angular, composed, still in every photograph, the way things are still when they are completely controlled. Then, the version underneath that, the Kang family, 3 generations deep in the Korean criminal world. Territories, operations. The specific sophistication of an empire that had survived because the legitimate side was too valuable to risk, and the criminal side was managed with enough discipline to stay largely invisible. 3 assassination attempts, all unsuccessful. 2 government investigations, both inconclusive. 1 Interpol file that was more rumor than record. She read all of it. Then she closed the laptop, sat in the dark, opened it again, booked a flight to Los Angeles, departing at 5:47 a.m. She went to the kitchen and left a note on the table for Elijah. It said, "Do not do anything." I mean it, 3 words per sentence, because that was how serious she was. Then she packed a bag, set an alarm for 3:30, and lay down without sleeping. She told herself, "You have walked into the worst moments of other people's lives and held them steady. You know how to do this. You know how to be present in impossible rooms." She told herself this until the alarm went off. She was wrong, as it turned out, but she wouldn't know that for another few hours. Century City, Los Angeles. The building looked, from the outside, like any of the other glass towers that make up that particular neighborhood. Corporate, deliberate, communicating money through the language of restraint. The lobby was marble and silence. A security desk with 2 men who were not the kind of security you hired from an agency. An elevator that required a key card. The assistant, who met her at the 38th floor, was a Korean woman, approximately her mother's age, who communicated everything through posture and nothing through expression, and who escorted Doris down a corridor and through a door and into a room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Kang Tae-jin was standing at the window. He turned when she came in. She had looked at his photographs for 2 hours. She had formed a mental image. The mental image was accurate in its specifics and completely wrong in its effect, because photographs did not communicate the quality of stillness he carried. Not the stillness of inaction, the stillness of absolute economy. He moved only when he decided to. Every gesture was a decision. He looked at her the way people rarely look at anyone, completely, unhurriedly, taking in the whole picture before forming any conclusion. He was in a dark suit. No tie. He looked perhaps 40 from a distance, and exactly 50 when you were close enough to see his eyes, which were the eyes of someone who had seen most things and been surprised by very few of them. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He sat across from her. He poured tea. She stared at the tea. She had not expected tea. He waited. "My name is Doris Paulman," she said. "Elijah Paulman is my brother. He made a serious mistake, and I understand there are consequences. I'm here to discuss alternatives to the ones currently on the table." "I know who you are," he said. His English was precise, formally fluent, carrying the particular quality of someone who learned it as an adult and had committed to it completely. "Then you know why I'm here. You're here because you love your brother and you believe that love obligates you to solve problems he created." A pause. "This is admirable and also very common. And the money is not common," she said. "I understand that. That's why I have a proposal." She opened her bag, set the documents on the table, the repayment schedule she had calculated on the plane, the financial projections. Her father's medical records, context, she explained, for understanding what Elijah had been trying to prevent, not an excuse for what he did. Tae-jin looked at the documents, then looked at her. "You made these on the plane," he said. "This morning?" "Yes. You calculated a 15-year repayment schedule on a notes app." 16, actually. I was being optimistic at 15. Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile. Something adjacent to it. The expression of someone encountering something they had not predicted encountering. "Your brother stole from me," he said. Not carelessly, from desperation. A pause. "I respect the distinction. Then, it changes nothing about what he owes." She kept her voice level. This was the skill, the clinical skill, the one she had spent 3 years building, the ability to stay, even when the ground was not. "I have a repayment proposal, reasonable terms. I can take a second job. My father's house has equity, Doris." Her name in his mouth, calm, complete. $4 million, 16 years. During those 16 years, what message does it send to every other person who has taken money from this organization and been allowed to walk away from it? She had no answer for this, because it was not a question. It was the wall at the end of every path she had constructed. She made every other argument anyway. She was methodical. She was thorough. She laid out every option she had built on that flight from Florida, and she made the case for each one, with the organized clarity of someone who had rehearsed in the airport and on the plane and in the lobby downstairs. He listened to all of it. He did not interrupt. He did not dismiss. He simply listened with the complete attention of a man who had decided she had earned that much. Then he set down his cup, looked at her, the long look again, the assessment, the thing she couldn't read the first time and still couldn't entirely read. Something in it that was not pity and not calculation and not interest in the ordinary sense of the word, something closer to recognition, as if he had been expecting something and found something else and was adjusting his understanding in real time. "There is one alternative," he said. She went still. "Become my wife. Your brother goes home tonight." The Los Angeles skyline continued to exist outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. A helicopter moved distantly across the view. The tea continued to cool. Doris sat with the sentence, turned it over, checked it from several angles to confirm she had heard it correctly. "You're serious," she said. "I am always serious. I'm 20 years old." "I know. You're 50, yes. That's a significant difference, yes." She looked at him. He looked back without discomfort. He was not performing confidence. He was not enjoying this. He was making an offer and waiting, with the patience of someone who had learned that waiting was almost always more effective than pressing, to see what she would do with it. "Why?" she said. "My family requires stability, a legitimate future for the organization's transition into legal operations, an heir capable of bridging our reach between Korea and America." He said this the way you recite a list you have memorized, accurately, without warmth, because it is the accurate version. "You are young and capable and American. Your brother created an obligation that gives us both something to negotiate with." "That is the least romantic proposal in the history of human interaction," she said. "It was not intended to be romantic." I noticed. She thought about Elijah on the front steps, unable to look at her. She thought about her father in South Bay, taking one blood pressure pill instead of 2 and calling it fine. She thought about a 16-year repayment schedule that she had built on a phone app before dawn, and that she had known, even as she built it, was not going to be enough. "She came here to save her brother," she said. "Yes." He reached for his phone. Elijah was released within the hour. She was in Seoul 4 days later. The flight was long enough for the reality to fully arrive. Somewhere over the Pacific, she sat in a business-class seat that she had never sat in before in her life, and looked out at the dark and thought, "This is what I did. This is a thing that I actually did." And then she put her headphones on and watched 2 movies she did not remember afterward, and landed at Incheon International at 6 in the morning local time. The Kang estate was in Yongsan district, behind walls that were tall enough to discourage questions without being tall enough to announce insecurity. At night, it was lit with the specific tasteful restraint of people who have nothing left to prove, which is to say, it was beautiful and quiet, and it communicated enormous power precisely by not trying to. A car brought her from the airport, a driver who did not speak, the city scrolling past the windows, Seoul at night, dense and illuminated and alive in a way that South Bay never quite was, a city that felt like it had layers you could spend years working through and still not reach the bottom of. The car turned through a gate, came to a stop in a courtyard. Doris got out with 1 suitcase. She stood in the entrance hall and counted 11 pieces of luggage being brought in around her, none of which were hers, and understood that the estate had its own systems and she was not yet part of them. Servants moved around her with the practiced efficiency of people who had been doing this specific job in this specific house for years. They bowed, the specific depth and duration communicating a hierarchy she did not yet know how to read. She nodded back, because nodding was what she would do at home, and one of the servants, young, careful, clearly trying not to correct her, made a gesture so subtle it was almost theoretical that suggested nodding was perhaps not quite the right response. She filed this away. She was shown to the room she would share with Tae-jin. It was roughly the size of her entire apartment in South Bay. Floor-to-ceiling windows on one wall, overlooking a garden she couldn't see clearly in the dark. A bed that was enormous and Japanese in its aesthetic. Low, wide, simple in design, but communicating through its materials, the kind of cost that looks like simplicity, because simplicity is the most expensive thing. She was left alone. She set her suitcase down, sat on the edge of the bed, looked at her phone, no signal. She set it face down on the nightstand, lay back on the bed still fully dressed, stared at the ceiling, and had a very quiet conversation with herself about the next 4 seconds, and then the 4 after that, and then the ones after those. This was a technique she had learned in her first clinical rotation, for the moments when the whole picture was too large to hold. You don't look at the whole picture. You look at the next 4 seconds. Then the next 4. Tae-jin came in an hour later. He changed in the adjacent dressing room. She could hear, faintly, the particular sounds of a person doing that efficiently, came to his side of the bed and lay down. He turned off his bedside lamp, did not look at her, said nothing. She said nothing. They lay in the dark, 4 feet apart, on opposite sides of a bed that could have slept 4 people, and that was how the first night ended. She was still awake 2 hours later. She was not sure he had slept either, but neither of them said anything about that, because they did not yet know how to be honest with each other, and that was fine, because there was time. The first week was an education. Breakfast appeared at 7:30 with the precision of a schedule that did not bend. The table in the main dining room was set formally even for morning. Place settings, multiple dishes, the specific organization of a meal that communicated that food was a form of culture and culture was a form of discipline. Doris sat at the table and looked at the spread and ate what she recognized and watched everything else with the careful attention of someone who had decided that observation was her best available tool until she had better ones. Tae-jin ate with efficiency. He was not unkind about the food she didn't touch. He did not explain the dishes she didn't know. He did not make her feel her ignorance. He simply ate his breakfast and read something on his phone and behaved as if a 20-year-old woman from Florida sitting across from him at 7:30 in the morning was a completely normal feature of his household. She found this infuriating in a way she could not entirely explain. The extended family appeared at dinner like weather, unpredictable in timing, unavoidable in effect. Aunts and cousins, and a great-uncle who communicated entirely through eyebrow positions, and who she later learned was actually the most powerful person in the room at most of these dinners, though nothing about his manner would suggest this. And Madame Kang, Tae-jin's mother, was 71 years old. She had the bearing of someone who had survived things that would have broken other people and had made a decision, sometime after surviving them, that softness was a luxury she had used up. She was not cruel in obvious ways. She was precise. She noticed everything Doris did and catalogued it with the thoroughness of someone preparing a very detailed report. The first formal family dinner happened 4 days after Doris arrived, a Tuesday. 12 people at the table. Doris reached for a dish in the wrong order. The table paused, not dramatically. The specific social pause of a group that has a shared understanding of the correct order of things and has registered that someone present does not share that understanding. It lasted approximately 1 second. Tae-jin, without looking at Doris, without drawing any attention to the moment or to her, simply moved the dish closer to her hand. That was all. No comment, no correction, no acknowledgement that anything had required adjusting. Doris noticed, filed it away. After dinner, she found herself in the garden, with no one else present, which was either an accident of timing or arranged by someone, and she stood in the cold air and looked at the garden and thought, he moved the dish. He moved the dish because I needed it to be closer, and he didn't want me to reach for it again incorrectly. He did it without drawing attention to either the mistake or the correction. She thought about this for longer than she would have expected. Later that week, an elderly aunt, Tae-jin's great aunt on his mother's side, a woman with very small hands and a very large opinion, appeared in the garden while Doris was sitting with a cup of coffee and spoke to her for approximately 4 minutes in rapid Korean. Doris smiled and nodded throughout, understanding nothing except the cadence and tone, which seemed conversational rather than hostile, and the aunt walked away, looking satisfied. Doris found Mrs. O, the housekeeper, in the corridor. The aunt who was in the garden just now. What did she say to me? Mrs. O looked carefully at something on the opposite wall. Mrs. O, please. She said several things. What kind of things? She said the garden is beautiful this time of year. She said the weather has been unusual. She said, Mrs. O paused, choosing. She said, "You have the face of someone who is pretending to be fine." Doris absorbed this. Is she usually right about things? She is almost always right about things, Mrs. O said, with the tone of someone reporting a fact they find mildly inconvenient. Then she's not wrong, Doris said. If you see her again, you can tell her that. Mrs. O looked at her. Then she almost smiled. It was a small, almost smile, quickly recovered from, "Yes, ma'am." Through all of this, through the dinners and the aunts and the corrections and the cultural weight of a household that had its own gravity, Tae-jin maintained a distance that was neither warm nor cold, consistent, deliberate, present without being intrusive. He never asked how she was adjusting in a way that required a particular answer, never reminded her what she had agreed to, never crossed the invisible line of her personal space without necessity. She had prepared herself to resist a man who would try to claim her. She had not prepared for a man who simply waited. His restraint confused her more than any aggression would have. It kept her up at night. She would not admit this to anyone. She barely admitted it to herself. The night the rain came, 7 days after the wedding, was the night the story found its center. Seoul rain in the late spring has a particular quality, persistent, not heavy, the kind that settles in and stays as if it has decided to. It traced lines down the floor-to-ceiling windows of the bedroom. The city beyond was smeared soft by it. The bedroom was enormous and too quiet for two people. On her side, Doris lay with her back to the center. Natural hair still wrapped. She had taken a shower 2 hours earlier, not because she needed one, but because she needed somewhere to be that was not this bed, not this room, not this enormous silent dark that pressed against her like something she couldn't push back. She was perfectly still, eyes on the wall, 20 years old. 4,000 miles from everything she had ever known, lying in a bed that cost more than her father's house. On his side, Kang Tae-jin lay with his eyes open, still dressed from the waist up, not because he had forgotten to change, but because, she was beginning to understand, he had the quality of a man who was always slightly braced. Always slightly ready. Sleep was something he permitted, rather than surrendered to. He had learned in 7 days that looking at her changed nothing, because she never looked back, so he looked at the ceiling instead. The distance between them could have fit a third person comfortably. Neither had crossed it. Not once. The silence stretched until it became its own thing, not the absence of sound, but a presence, the specific weight of two people in the same room who have not yet found the language to be in the same room. Then, his voice, low, deliberate, the way you step across ground you haven't mapped. Am I really that difficult to live with? She kept her eyes on the wall. No. Rain against the glass. Silence. His next words came from somewhere slightly closer to true. Then why do you look at me as if I don't exist? She didn't turn, didn't shift, didn't give him even the outline of her face, just stared ahead. Like the answer was written somewhere in the dark, like she was deciding whether to read it out loud. And then, quietly, completely, without cruelty and without apology, because, a breath so small it barely moved the air. You can't make me feel anything. The rain, nothing else. Gangsters had pointed guns at Kang Tae-jin. Politicians had betrayed him. People he had trusted had tried to remove him. He had sat in rooms where everyone present wanted him dead, and had held his face completely neutral because showing anything was a form of losing. None of that had ever hit the way those 7 words did. He said nothing. She didn't move. And in the dark, without speaking, without moving, Kang Tae-jin made himself a promise. He would never force her. He would never demand her. He would never use what she owed him to claim what she had not given. But he was going to become someone worth feeling something for, if it took the rest of his life. Because it occurred to him, lying in the dark, with the rain on the windows, and 7 words still settling into the space they were going to occupy from this night forward, that he could not actually remember the last time anyone had said anything to him that was completely honest. And that was something. That was, perhaps, a place to start. It was around this time that the world outside the Kang estate began moving in ways that would matter. His name was Shin Dong-hyuk, 43 years old, second generation in the criminal world. Not old money, but strategic money, the kind built by someone who had watched how the old families operated and decided to be more efficient. He had spent the last decade absorbing smaller organizations with the patience of something geological, choosing his targets carefully and his timing precisely. He was not impulsive. This was what made him dangerous. He had been watching the Kang organization for 2 years, looking for instability. The old families were conservative by nature, resistant to change, which was a strength in stable times and a weakness in changing ones. Tae-jin had, by all external indicators, maintained his position well. The legitimate businesses were growing. The criminal operations were disciplined. The family succession was unclear, which was a concern, but not an immediate one. Then Tae-jin had acquired an American wife, 20 years old, Black American, no connections to the criminal world, no understanding of Korean culture, a nursing student from Florida. This was, in Shin's assessment, the first real crack in the wall. He began circulating the narrative carefully. Tae-jin was losing his edge. The American wife was an embarrassment. Too young, too foreign, evidence of a man making sentimental decisions. The organization was weakening from within. The time for transition was approaching. He sent Tae-jin a message through the channels that such messages travel. One card, one line, step aside, or I begin. Tae-jin read it at his desk in the East Wing, set it face down, sat for a moment with the stillness of someone who has already processed the thing and is now deciding what to do about it. He called his head of security. Double her protection detail. When? Tonight? Quietly. She doesn't need to know. And Shin? He's telling a story about me. Let him tell it. A man who believes his own narrative stops watching for contradictions. A pause. Let him stop watching. He went down to dinner. That evening, Doris noticed 2 new faces among the household staff. She had been inventorying the staff since her second day. Names, roles, the way each person moved through the household. Because information was the only resource she had in this place, and she collected it the way other people collected things they couldn't afford to lose. She said nothing about the new faces at dinner, but she watched Tae-jin across the table, with a question forming behind her eyes that she wasn't yet ready to ask out loud. He ate his dinner and answered something his second cousin said, and gave absolutely nothing away. She filed this away too. She found the first clue by accident, the way most important things are found. A letter on the table in the common room. She almost walked past it. The Kang family seal in the corner caught her eye the way familiar patterns catch your eye in an unfamiliar place. She picked it up, saw the letterhead of a women's shelter in Mapo district, saw the formal language of institutional gratitude, and set it back down. She thought about it for 2 days. Then she found Mrs. O, the letter in the common room, the women's shelter in Mapo. Mrs. O looked at the middle distance with the expression of someone weighing how much to say. Mr. Kang supports several organizations, she said finally. Generally, anonymously. How anonymously? The organizations know. The public does not. Why not? Mrs. O considered this with the expression of someone deciding whether to be precise or general. She chose precise. He says that people who give to be seen are not really giving. Doris let this sit. What else does he support? Mrs. O looked at her. Something in that look. A reassessment, slight but real. The specific adjustment of someone who has been treating you as a guest and is beginning to wonder if you might be something else. She told Doris about the children's wing at Yonsei Severance Hospital, the scholarship fund for Korean American students without family connections, a program that had sent 47 students to university in the last 8 years. The debt relief program for elderly shop owners in Mapo and Jongno. The legal fund for immigrant families in processing, run through a law firm that he had no visible connection to. Doris counted these things. He doesn't discuss any of this, she said. He does not discuss it with anyone, not even within the family. She thanked Mrs. O and walked back to the bedroom and stood at the window and looked at the garden and ran through everything she had assembled about Kang Tae-jin, the newspaper version, the Interpol-adjacent version, the version she had built in the first week from observation, and now this version, the hospitals, the scholarships, the shelter, the legal fund, the money that went out without any expectation of recognition. She had come to Seoul with a complete picture of who she had married. She was beginning to understand that the picture had been assembled from the wrong materials. She found the photograph 3 weeks later, a wrong turn in the East Wing. The estate was large enough for wrong turns still to be possible after a month. She found herself in a small study she hadn't been in before. Books, a desk, photographs on the wall, formal family portraits mostly, business occasions, the kind of documentation that records a life without revealing it. One photograph was different. A younger Tae-jin, late 20s, maybe 30, completely unguarded in a way the current version of him never allowed himself to be. He was laughing at something off camera, and the laugh was the laugh of someone who had not yet learned that laughing was a vulnerability. Beside him, a woman with her hand resting on a rounded belly, looking at him instead of the camera, the expression of someone who believes no one is watching the way they are watching. Doris stood in the doorway. Tae-jin heard her, did not turn around. The quality of the silence was different this time, less defended, more careful. "You don't have to explain," she said. "I know," he said. They stood there for a moment. "Her name was Ji-yeon," he said. His voice was factual. He had made it factual, the way you make something factual, to keep it survivable. 22 years ago, an assassin came for me. She was standing beside me. He stopped. The bullets found her instead. Doris said nothing. There was nothing useful to say. "She was 7 months pregnant," he said. "We had chosen our daughter's name already." "So-yeon." He let that sit. "I survived. They didn't." She looked at the photograph. The woman's expression, the specific unguarded look of someone watching a person they love when they think no one is recording it. "She's beautiful," Doris said. She was. A long silence. "You didn't want to remarry," Doris said. "Not a question, no. But you had no choice. The family requires certain things. The organization requires certain things. The future requires certain things." He paused. "None of these are small concerns. So you agreed to a political arrangement," she said, "and got me." He finally turned and looked at her. Something in his expression, she had been studying his expressions for a month, cataloguing them the way she catalogued the household, because they were rare and therefore valuable, was different, more open than usual, as if the photograph and the conversation and the particular quality of this moment had loosened something. She said what she had been thinking since she found the picture. "You're not the only prisoner in this house." He looked at her for a long time. The shift happened behind his eyes, quiet, tectonic, the kind of movement that happens once and does not undo itself. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. They both understood that something real had just been said, and that real things, once said, changed the room they're said in permanently. The formal tea happened 6 weeks in. Madame Kang arranged it with the specific precision of someone who has been selecting her moment. 12 family members, a Tuesday afternoon, green tea and rice cakes, and the specific social architecture of an occasion that looks like hospitality and operates like an assessment. She began with Doris's posture, not harshly, with the gentle precision of someone pointing out a technical error. Then table manners. Then her manner of speaking. "Too direct," she said, through careful translation, by a cousin who was visibly uncomfortable with the assignment. Too American. Too accustomed to saying what she thought without measuring the weight of it in the room first. Then, with the gentleness that weaponized gentleness always has, she mentioned several names. Korean women from appropriate families, women with the right connections, the right backgrounds, the right understanding of what was required. The table waited. Doris picked up her teacup, set it down, then she spoke, in Korean. Broken, imperfect, assembled from 5 weeks of 20-minute morning sessions, with an app and a textbook, and the occasional help of Mrs. O, who had never been asked to help, but had offered because she was, underneath the professionalism, a person who wanted things to go well. The Korean was wrong in several places. The grammar was approximate, the pronunciation was going to need work, but the meaning was exact. She addressed Madame Kang with the correct formal honorific, the one she had specifically looked up and practiced, because she understood that getting this right mattered more than getting anything else right. She acknowledged her own mistakes in the household, specifically, concretely, without self-pity or excuse. She thanked Madame Kang for the standard she maintained, and then, I will not become someone else, but I am learning to belong here without losing who I am. I only ask for time to prove that is possible. The table was silent. Madame Kang looked at her with the expression of someone who has encountered something they had not prepared for and has not yet decided what to do about it. She did not respond. But she did not criticize Doris again that afternoon. Later, Mrs. O found Doris in the corridor. Ma'am, Madame Kang asked me to relay something. Yes? She said your pronunciation of the honorific was incorrect. A measured pause. And then she told me which recordings to give you to correct it. Doris stared at her. Then she laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one. The first full real laugh that had come out of her since she arrived in Seoul. The laugh of someone who has just encountered something unexpected and genuinely funny and cannot pretend otherwise. Mrs. O's professional composure developed a small crack. Tell her thank you, Doris said. I already did, said Mrs. O. And she was, briefly and unmistakably, smiling. Now, this is the part of the story where things accelerate. If this story has you, and we believe it does, subscribe to Soul and Soil Stories right now and hit the like button. We do not rush. We build every story until it earns what it costs you. Subscribe so you are here for the rest of this one, because the rest of this one is going to ask everything. Elijah called on a Tuesday afternoon. Doris was at the desk with the Korean textbook open. She was on page 94, compound sentences, which were genuinely difficult, and a cup of tea that had gone cold without her noticing, and she picked up the phone and heard her brother's voice and felt the particular mixture of love and exhaustion and complicated loyalty that Elijah had produced in her since she was old enough to understand that some people you love require more of you than other people simply by nature. Elijah, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm okay. A pause she recognized. I have to tell you something. You always have to tell me something. I mean something specific. She closed the textbook. Okay, tell me. I found a way out for you. He said it fast, the way he always said the things he was afraid of saying slowly. Someone I know. A contact. Nothing to do with any of this. They can get you documentation. New identity. A flight back to the US. Clean entry. You'd be home in 72 hours, and no one would be able to trace it. Doris was quiet. I heard you. You don't have to stay there. This is my mess. It was always my mess. I will find another way to deal with it. I cannot keep watching you live someone else's life because of a mistake I made. She stood up from the desk and walked to the window. Seoul in the late afternoon. The city from the estate's upper floor, dense and layered, moving in 10 directions simultaneously, indifferent to her specifically, and alive in general. She had hated this view when she first arrived. It had felt like evidence of how far she was from anything familiar. She had stopped hating it, somewhere around week 3. She wasn't sure when, exactly. She thought about the photograph in the East Wing, the woman looking at a man who was laughing and not knowing that someone was recording the moment. She thought about a dish, moved closer to her, without comment. She thought about a security detail, doubled quietly in the night, without explanation. She thought about a man who anonymously funded the surgeries of children he had never met, and told no one, because people who give to be seen are not really giving. She thought about sitting in the small study and saying, "You're not the only prisoner," and watching something shift behind his eyes that had not shifted back. She thought about the Korean textbook on page 94 and the 20 minutes she spent every morning before the household woke up practicing words she had chosen to learn. She had not chosen to learn them for him. She had chosen to learn them for herself, because she had decided, somewhere in the last 6 weeks, without making it a decision exactly, to stop being someone this situation was happening to, and to become someone who was happening to this situation instead. She had not decided to stay, but she had stopped deciding to leave, and those were different things. "No," she said. Elijah, no. Just listen. I don't need to listen. The answer is no. Are you? Is he forcing you to? No one is forcing me to do anything. Her voice was steady. Certain in a way that surprised her slightly, because she had not rehearsed this certainty. It had arrived on its own. I am staying because I am choosing to stay. That is my decision, and it is not about you. A long silence on the line. He said finally, quieter. What's happening there? She looked at the Seoul skyline. I'm not sure yet, she said honestly. But it's mine. Whatever it is, it's mine. She ended the call, stood at the window a moment longer, then turned away from it. That evening at dinner, she walked to the table and sat beside Tae-jin instead of across from him. He glanced at her, a brief, measuring glance, taking in the shift without commenting on it. He poured her tea. They had dinner side by side for the first time. At one point, their hands were almost touching on the table, and neither of them moved away. Neither of them mentioned it. Elijah meant well. This is the thing about Elijah that makes him impossible to hate and impossible to excuse. He always means well. He has been meaning well for his entire adult life. He meant well when he took the second mortgage without telling anyone. He meant well when he joined the investment network. He meant well when he tried to fix everything and made it worse. He is constitutionally incapable of sitting with a problem without trying to solve it. And he is catastrophically bad at solving things. And the tragedy of him is that he loves so fiercely and provides so poorly and cannot see the gap between those two things. After Doris refused the escape route, he sat with his guilt for 3 weeks. Then he got an idea. Shin Dong-hyuk's organization had been making indirect contact, through an old associate, through channels that felt low stakes, through the specific casualness of communication, designed not to seem like communication. They had suggested that certain information might have value to certain parties. Elijah had been in Seoul for a visit 6 weeks earlier. He had overheard things, security arrangements mentioned in passing, schedules, names. Nothing that felt significant. Background noise from a household he was a peripheral figure in. He told himself it was harmless. He told himself the money would go directly to Doris. Anonymous transfer, concrete repayment, a real step toward being the person she deserved instead of the disaster she had rescued. He told himself all of this, and then he made the call. He did not understand what he was handing Shin Dong-hyuk. He understood it 3 days later, when 2 men appeared outside his apartment and explained, with the specific courtesy of people who do not need to be threatening because the situation is already threatening enough, that his usefulness to Shin was complete and his cooperation was now a permanent arrangement. He called the number he had been given in Seoul. 20 minutes later, Tae-jin knew everything. He came to find Doris that evening. She was at the desk. Korean textbook, page 102. She heard his footsteps in the corridor and knew from the quality of them. She had memorized his footsteps over 8 weeks, the way you memorize anything you encounter constantly enough, that something was wrong. He stood in the doorway. His expression was the expression she had learned to read, as the gravity version of him. The one he wore when things were serious and required the full weight of his attention, and he had decided to give them that weight without letting them become larger than they needed to be. It was not anger. It was grief. "What did he do?" she said. "Not a question." He told her. All of it. He did not soften it or structure it to land well. He told her what Elijah had sold and what he had expected to receive for it, and what he had actually given away, which was information that Shin had spent 6 months looking for. She listened with her hands flat on the desk and her eyes on him and the clinical part of her, the part she had spent 3 years building, holding the room steady around the information as it arrived. "He thought he was helping," she said, when he finished. "I know. He genuinely believed. Doris, I know." She was quiet for a moment. "Can you protect him? Not without consequences to people who have nothing to do with this." So the answer is no. The answer is that what it would cost to protect him now is something I am not willing to take from people who don't deserve to pay it. She understood this. She was a nursing student. She understood triage. She understood that resources deployed in one direction were resources not available in another, and that this was not cruelty, it was physics. She sat with it. This was the moment that the story had been building toward, the moment where love reaches its actual limit. Not because the love runs out, because it finally meets the reality that you cannot indefinitely rescue people from themselves, that at some point they have to stand in what they chose. "Do what you have to do," she said. The words came out even, steady, the clinical voice. But her hands, folded on the closed textbook, completely still, were still with the deliberate, effortful stillness of someone holding themselves together through an act of will that was not going to last much longer. Tae-jin saw it. He crossed the room, did not sit beside her. Sat across from her at the desk, equal distance, equal level, as if he understood that this moment required nothing hierarchical, nothing that communicated above or below. He did not touch her, he did not speak. He stayed, and slowly, in the way that something under sustained pressure will eventually find the support it needs, her hands relaxed. They sat in silence for a long time. Then, "He was just trying to fix it," she said, quietly, almost to herself. "Yes. He was trying to be who he should have been from the beginning. Yes. That doesn't make it right." "No," Tae-jin said. "It doesn't." She nodded once. "Okay," she said. That was all. But in the silence that followed, in the space between what had just been decided and what would happen next, she understood something she had not fully understood before. That she was not angry at Elijah. She was exhausted by him. And exhaustion, she was beginning to learn, is what love looks like when it has finally accepted that it cannot save someone from their own nature. You can love someone and not be able to save them. These things can coexist. This was a thing she had known intellectually. She knew it differently now. The charity gala was Tae-jin's idea. He framed it simply: a public event, a high-profile appearance, a counter-narrative to the story Shin had been telling in criminal circles about instability and weakness at the top. The most effective response to a narrative, he had learned, was not argument. It was evidence, he asked her, with the word please, which she noted and catalogued, because it was the first time, if she would attend. "That's the first time you've said please to me," she said. He looked at her. "I say please. Not to me. He stopped. Considered this. "Please," he said again, deliberately, with the specific expression of a man who has just conceded a point and is not entirely comfortable with it. She almost smiled. "Fine, but I'm choosing my own dress." "Of course. And I'm not wearing anything that requires structural support around the neck." "I don't know what that means. It means my neck needs to breathe. Your neck can breathe." "Good. Then we agree." He looked at her with an expression she had started to recognize, somewhere between exasperation and something warmer that did not yet have a name. He turned away before she could study it too carefully. She chose a red dress, floor length, clean lines, nothing that required structural support around the neck. She looked extraordinary, and she was aware of this in the specific unself-conscious way of someone who has decided that existing fully in a room is not the same thing as performing. She walked into the ballroom beside Tae-jin, and the room noticed the particular alertness of a crowd of powerful people encountering something they cannot immediately categorize. Too young, too composed, too clearly at ease beside him to be merely decorative. She circulated. She had enough Korean now to navigate small talk, not perfectly, but genuinely, with the imperfect authenticity of someone who was trying, rather than the careful correctness of someone who was performing. She had discovered over the last 2 months that imperfect and genuine landed better in most rooms than polished and hollow. An older woman, wife of a government official, she would later determine, asked Doris, in Korean, how she was finding Seoul. "Larger than I expected," Doris said, "and more beautiful, and I am still learning." The woman looked at her. "Your Korean is very good," she said. It was not very good. But the compliment was real, a compliment for effort rather than achievement, which was its own kind of acknowledgement. "Thank you," Doris said. "I have good teachers." Across the room, she looked up and found Tae-jin looking at her, not monitoring, watching. The way you watch something that has surprised you. She raised an eyebrow. He looked away. She grinned, turned back to the woman she was talking to. This, right here, this moment, was the first time since arriving in Seoul that she felt she was somewhere she might belong. Not because the room had accepted her, because she had decided, standing in it, that she was there. The chandelier light caught the glasses around her. The string quartet played something she half recognized. Tae-jin was 40 feet away, having a conversation she couldn't hear, and she could tell from the body language of the other people in that conversation that they were either afraid of him or deeply deferential to him, and both of those things were true simultaneously. She thought, "I married this man to save my brother." She thought, "I stayed because I chose to." She thought, "I am not sure when those became different things." The window shattered, one sound, then more. Then the room understood what was happening and became chaos. Tables going over, glasses shattering, the string quartet abandoning their instruments, people dropping to the floor, moving for exits, the specific human response to physical threat, which is fast and loud and different from anything that isn't real. The man with the gun was 20 feet from her. He was pointing it at her specifically. She had time to register this, the direction of the barrel, the specific geometry of it, before she had time to do anything about it. Tae-jin was across the room, and then he was in front of her. She did not see him cross the distance. She would not be able to reconstruct it afterward. One moment he was 40 feet away, and the next moment his back was between her and the gun, and then the sound of it, the specific physical wrongness of 2 shots in an enclosed space, and he went down. She caught him. She was on the floor with him, in her red dress, and her hands were on the wounds before her mind had fully processed the sequence of events. Because 3 years of clinical training does not wait for processing. She pressed and assessed and called for help in Korean and directed people around her with the specific authority of someone who knows what the next 3 things need to be. "Stay with me," she said. "Stay with me. Look at me." His eyes found hers. He looked at her with the specific directness of someone who has decided to look at exactly one thing and has chosen. He reached up. His hand found her wrist. Her voice, which had not shaken through any of it, through the sound or the floor or the blood or the directing, shook. "Right here," she said. "Steadier. Don't you dare go anywhere." Something in his face. She would think about this later, in the corridor, in the hours that followed, released. Just slightly, as if this was exactly where he had intended to be. This is the most important moment in this story, right here, this corridor. This woman on the floor in a red dress. If this story has reached you, and we know it has, because these stories always reach the people they're meant for, drop a comment right now. Tell us what you felt when he stepped in front of her. Tell us when you knew. We read every single one. The hospital corridor outside surgery was fluorescent and plastic in the way all surgical waiting rooms are. Not designed for the people who have to be there, but for the people who have to manage them. Doris sat in a plastic chair, her red dress. Dried blood on her hands, she had not thought to wash. The specific stillness of someone who is using everything they have to stay where they are. She was thinking in lists. This was what she did under real pressure. Organized the available information into lists and worked through them systematically. The list of what had happened. The list of what she knew medically, which was enough to understand the situation without being enough to know the outcome. The list of things she could not control, which was currently the longest list by a significant margin. The extended Kang family filled the corridor. Cousins and business associates, and the great-uncle who communicated through eyebrows, and who was, she had learned, actually the most powerful person in any room he entered. Everyone was performing composure with varying degrees of success. Madame Kang sat 3 seats from Doris. Neither of them spoke. An hour passed. 2. Doris's hands began to shake. She pressed them flat against her thighs, and they kept shaking. Her breathing started coming in pieces, the specific fractured quality of someone fighting to hold it together who is starting to lose the fight. She was a nursing student. She could identify what was happening to her from the outside. She recognized, with the clinical detachment that was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain, that she was heading towards shock, and that the techniques she would normally deploy for someone else were not working on herself. She pressed harder, the hands kept shaking, and then, movement. Madame Kang stood from her chair 3 seats away. She moved to the seat beside Doris. She sat down without ceremony, without preamble. She did not look at Doris. She did not speak. She was not a woman built for the kind of comfort that arrives in words. The whole household knew this. The whole family knew this. Doris had spent 2 months learning this, so she did not try. She placed one hand on Doris's back and left it there. Something in Doris, some final structural support, simply gave way. Not politely, not quietly, not with any of the composed dignity she had built and maintained over 2 months in a country that was not hers, in a family that had not yet decided what to do with her, in a life she had not chosen and had chosen to stay in anyway. She collapsed forward and cried the way you cry, when you find out that what you thought you were protecting yourself from had already gotten in, when you realize you had lost the argument with yourself sometime in the last 2 months without noticing, and now you were sitting in a hospital corridor with blood on your hands and the specific terror of someone who did not know how much they had to lose until the precise moment they almost lost it. The same woman who had lain perfectly still in an enormous dark bedroom 7 days after the wedding and whispered, "You can't make me feel anything," could not right now stop. The family stared. The nurses stared. Madame Kang kept her hand exactly where it was, did not move it, did not speak. Just kept it there, for the entire 2 hours that remained before the surgeon came out. And when the surgeon came out and said he was stable, and the family exhaled around her with the specific collective release of people who had been holding something very heavy, Madame Kang moved her hand from Doris's back. She stood. She looked at Doris once, did not say anything, then went to speak to the surgeon. It was not acceptance, but it was something that would become acceptance, given time. And time they had. He was awake when she came in the next morning, pale, an IV. The monitors doing their work. She read them automatically and then made herself stop because she was not here as a nurse. She sat beside the bed, took his hand. He looked at her with the alertness of someone who had been waiting. "Shoulder and chest," she said. "Clinical reflex." The chest wound was close to the subclavian, but they caught it. "You're going to be fine." "I know," he said. "You don't know. You're not qualified to know." "I know," he said again, with a patience that was slightly insufferable, and also, she was discovering, deeply characteristic of him. She sat with him for a moment. Then, "I had a way out. 4 months ago, Elijah arranged it. New documentation, a flight back to the US, clean entry." He watched her. I said no. A pause. I know, he said quietly. She looked at him. You knew. Yes. How? It went through channels that I monitor. Not because I was surveilling you, he said this carefully, because I monitor those channels for other reasons. It appeared. I recognized what it was. And you said nothing. It was not my decision to make. She sat with this. He had known for 4 months that she could leave. He had known, and he had not used it. Not to bind her, not to remind her of what she owed him, not to take it from her the way someone in his position could easily have taken it. He had simply waited to see what she decided, on her own terms. She looked at him for a long moment. You are the most infuriating man I have ever met, she said. The corner of his mouth moved, slowly, and then the first real smile she had seen from him, unexpected and slightly uneven and completely unguarded, the smile from the photograph in the East Wing. Kang Tae-jin smiled. I've been told, he said. She laughed. He laughed. Brief and quiet and slightly absurd. 2 people laughing in a hospital room at 7 in the morning, and it was the most honest thing that had happened between them. It was also, she thought, the beginning of something she did not yet have a word for. She was comfortable not having the word yet. There was time. In the days that followed, the world around them continued to move. Shin Dong-hyuk was dismantled through the coordinated institutional pressure that Tae-jin had spent 20 years building the capacity for quietly. 3 allied organizations moved simultaneously. Shin's financial networks were frozen. His political connections were exposed through evidence that had been waiting for exactly this moment. He was arrested 11 days after the gala on charges that were legitimate, documented, and had been building for 3 years. It was, in the end, not a dramatic conclusion. It was an administrative one. Which was fitting. The most dangerous people in the world are rarely defeated dramatically. They are defeated systematically, by the patient accumulation of exactly the right information at exactly the right moment. Tae-jin had been patient. He had been right. In Florida, Elijah sat across from a lawyer in a conference room that smelled of carpet and coffee and the particular atmosphere of consequential decisions being made in unremarkable rooms. He had options. He could disappear. There were people who would facilitate it, a life rebuilt somewhere else, the specific freedom of never being found. He would spend the rest of it looking over his shoulder, but he would be technically free. He thought about his sister on the floor of a ballroom in Seoul with her hands on a man's chest wounds. He thought about what she gave up. He thought about the thing he had spent his entire life avoiding, the specific accountability of a person who has caused real harm and must decide whether to face it without an audience, without applause, without anyone to witness the moment as evidence of his good character. He picked up the pen. He signed the cooperation agreement. He would testify against the financial network. He would accept prison time. He would stop trying to fix everything himself and start with the only thing he could actually repair, which was his own character. He did it alone. No audience, no speech, no one watching, just a man and a pen and a decision that was long, significantly overdue. It was the first genuinely brave thing Elijah Paulman had ever done in his life. 3 months later, Tae-jin called 2 of his oldest lieutenants into the main office. Men who had been with him for over 20 years. Men who had built the Eastern distribution network alongside him and who had, at various points, trusted him with things worth more than money. He told them he was closing it. The room went still. Park, 60 years old, completely grey, a man who had survived things that had retired most people, spoke carefully. That will cost us 2 alliances, yes, and create an enemy, yes. Then why? Tae-jin looked at him, then at the table, then back. Because it is the first thing I can close without innocent people paying the cost. A pause. So it is the first. Park looked at him for a long time, then nodded, once. The nod of a man who does not entirely agree, but who has decided to follow it anyway, because he has been following this particular man for 22 years, and the judgment has, on balance, been sound. The meeting ended. Tae-jin stood at the window. Seoul moved forward the way it always had, continuous, indifferent, alive. It had been doing this before the Kang family existed. It would keep doing it after. He had built an empire inside it. Now he was beginning the long work of taking it apart. Not all at once. Not without strategy, not without cost, but starting here. Starting with this. Years later, a Tuesday evening in late autumn, the city going amber and purple at the edges, the way Seoul does when the season is turning. The balcony of the Kang estate. 2 chairs, tea that was still warm. Doris ran a trauma rehabilitation foundation for victims of organized crime, built with Kang money, driven by her own hands, her own design, her own insistence that the people who needed it most were usually the ones the existing systems were least equipped to help. The program had expanded to 3 cities in the last year, through a partnership she had negotiated herself, in Korean, with imperfect grammar and complete conviction. She was 24 years old. She had not stopped being herself. She had not become Korean. She had become something she was still in the process of naming, a woman who had taken an impossible situation and made actual space in it, who had learned the customs and the language and the specific protocols of a household that had not been built for her and had built herself into it anyway. Not by surrendering who she was, by refusing to. Mrs. O was the closest thing to a best friend she had in Seoul. They both maintained that this was professionally appropriate. Madame Kang still corrected her pronunciation. The corrections had become the language of a relationship that did not have another language. Care expressed as precision, investment expressed as critique, affection expressed as high standards. Doris had learned to hear it that way. It had taken time. She heard it that way now. Elijah called every Sunday. The calls were shorter than they used to be, and more honest than they had ever been. He was reading. He was thinking. He was, for the first time in his life, sitting still long enough for things to arrive. Their father's medical bills were handled. He had stopped asking how. Tae-jin sat beside her on the balcony. The city below, the tea, the specific, comfortable silence of 2 people who have learned each other's weight well enough to be quiet together without it costing anything. He asked, without looking at her, "Do you remember what you told me our first week together?" She looked at her tea, allowed herself the small smile that she had stopped trying to hide. "I remember. Is it still true?" She looked at him. She took her time. "I told you that you couldn't make me feel anything," she said. "I was wrong." She turned back to the city. "But it wasn't you who changed it." He was quiet. "I spent 4 years after my mother died, feeling everything, and then I spent 2 years feeling nothing, and I thought that was strength." She considered this. "You didn't teach me to feel. You just waited until I was ready to stop running from it." A long pause. "You waited long enough for me to catch up." He said nothing. He took her hand. The city continued below them, indifferent, continuous, alive. The Kang Empire was smaller than it had been 3 years ago, and more legitimate than it had ever been, and there was still a long way to go, and they both knew it, and neither of them pretended otherwise. He held her hand. She let him. That was enough. That had always been enough. They had both just needed time to know it. This is Soul and Soil Stories. We are here for the stories that deserve to be told fully, slowly, carefully, all the way through, until they earn every emotion they ask from you. If Doris and Tae-jin's story reached you today, subscribe to our channel right now. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and tell us the moment this story got you. Was it the bedroom, the photograph, the corridor at 2 in the morning, the hand she let him take? We read every comment, every single one, because this community is the reason these stories get told. And if you know someone who needs this story right now, someone who is in a room they did not choose, trying to find a reason to stay, trying to figure out whether what they are feeling is strength or defense, share it with them. Some people need to know that the wall they built around themselves is not permanent. That the right person doesn't tear it down, they just wait outside it, long enough for you to open the door yourself. We will see you in the next one. End. Extended scenes. There is a moment, about 3 weeks into Doris's time in Seoul, that she does not tell anyone about. It is a Saturday. Tae-jin has meetings that run through the afternoon and into the early evening, which means the household has a particular quality of reduced pressure, the specific lightness of a space where its most significant gravity source is temporarily absent. The staff moves a little differently. Conversations in the kitchen are slightly louder. The great-uncle naps without apology in the main sitting room. Doris uses the time to walk the estate. Not the rooms she has been shown, the rooms she has not been shown. She finds the library, a room she had suspected existed, based on the number of books that had appeared in various corridors and sitting rooms. Clearly the overflow of a collection that required its own dedicated space. 3 walls, floor to ceiling. The 4th wall, a window overlooking the garden. A reading chair positioned to use the afternoon light from the window with the precision of someone who had thought carefully about it. She stands in the doorway, runs her eyes across the spines. Korean texts, English texts, Japanese, French, business, history, military history specifically. There is a significant shelf of it. Medical reference volumes, which surprises her until she remembers the hospitals he funds. Philosophy, a full row of Korean classical literature, and in the corner, on a lower shelf, several volumes in what looks like a children's section, picture books, illustrated stories, that are clearly old, clearly handled, clearly read many times. She crouches to look at them. She does not touch them. She understands immediately what they are and who they were bought for, and she stays crouched for a moment, with this understanding settling into her, heavy and quiet. She stands, goes to the medical reference shelf and pulls a volume on cardiac pharmacology, because her father's next appointment is in 2 weeks, and she wants to be prepared when he calls. She sits in the reading chair, uses the afternoon light. That evening at dinner, she asks Tae-jin, without preamble, "Is there a particular shelf in the library I shouldn't use?" He looks at her. "No," he says. "The whole library is available?" "Yes, including the lower left corner." A pause. He looks at his plate, then back at her. "Yes," he says. His voice is the same, but something in his posture has shifted, slightly, barely, the way things shift when something has been encountered that requires adjustment. "Thank you," she says. She does not say anything else about it. He does not say anything else about it. But that night, for the first time since the wedding, Tae-jin does not read before bed. He lies on his back and looks at the ceiling for a long time. In the dark, 4 feet from him, Doris is not asleep either. Neither of them says so. There is also the matter of the motorcycle. This happens approximately 5 weeks into her time in the estate, on a morning when Doris has finished her Korean study session and has 2 hours before the household expects her to be present for anything. She is standing in the courtyard. She often comes to the courtyard when she needs air that doesn't feel curated. When one of the security staff, a man named Jin Ho, who is approximately her age and who has the specific combination of being very large and very gentle that she has noticed in a certain kind of person, comes out of the garage pushing a motorcycle. It is a clean, older model, not flashy, practical. She says, entirely without planning to. "Can you teach me to ride that?" Jin Ho looks at her, then looks at the motorcycle, then looks at her again. "I would need to ask Mr. Kang," he says carefully. "Do you need to?" "For liability reasons, ma'am. Yes." She considers this. "Ask him," she says. The request reaches Tae-jin through whatever internal communication system the estate operates on, and Doris knows it has reached him because at lunch he sets down his chopsticks and looks at her with an expression she has come to understand as the expression he wears when she has done something unexpected that he is still processing. "You want to learn to ride a motorcycle," he says. "I'd like the option," she says. "The option?" To leave the estate independently, on my own schedule. He is quiet for a moment. If you want to leave the estate, he says, you don't need a motorcycle. You can use any of the cars. With a driver. Yes. I want to learn to ride a motorcycle, she says. Not because I'm planning to escape, because I want to be able to go places by myself. He looks at her, she looks back. This is the version of their dynamic she finds most interesting. These moments where they are negotiating something that is technically small and is actually about something much larger. The motorcycle is not about the motorcycle. The motorcycle is about whether she gets to have any autonomous movement inside a life she did not choose. And they both know this, and neither of them says it directly, and the conversation about the motorcycle contains the entire conversation underneath it. Jin-ho can teach you, he says finally. Thank you. On the condition that you wear full gear, and that you stay on estate roads until Jin-ho confirms you're ready for traffic. Reasonable. And that you tell me where you're going. A pause. Not for permission, for safety. She considers this. Okay, she says. Okay, he says. They return to lunch. The motorcycle lessons begin that Thursday. She is, it turns out, a natural, or at least willing to fall off enough times to stop being afraid of falling, which is most of what learning anything actually requires. Jin-ho is a patient teacher. He corrects her balance and her throttle control, and her cornering, without making her feel incompetent, which is the specific skill of someone who has taught before. 3 weeks later, she takes the motorcycle out through the estate gate, for the first time, alone, onto the streets of Yongsan. She comes back an hour later, with street food from a pojangmatcha she found 4 blocks from the estate, wrapped rice and fish cake skewers, and a paper cup of something warm, and she brings enough for Jin-ho and eats it standing in the courtyard, and feels, for the first time, like she lives somewhere rather than being kept somewhere. That evening, she tells Tae-jin where she went. He listens. The pojangmatcha near the convenience store, he says. I know that one. You eat street food. He looks at her with the expression. I have eaten street food, he says, with the dignity of a man who has eaten street food and does not require further comment on the matter. Which one do you get? The tteokbokki. Is it good? It's the best in the district. I didn't try the tteokbokki. You should. I will, she says. They sit with this small, ordinary conversation about food from a street stall, which is not a small or ordinary thing at all, which is 2 people finding a third space between their 2 separate worlds, where something casual and real can exist. She goes back the next day. She tries the tteokbokki. He was right. It is the best in the district. And there is one more thing. 2 months before the gala, a phone call that Doris makes herself, that she does not tell Tae-jin about, that she thinks about afterward for a long time. She calls her father. This is not unusual. She calls him every week, Sunday evenings, the same time she has called him every week since she left for her clinical program. But this call is different because it is a Wednesday, and she has not called on a Wednesday before, and her father knows this when he picks up. Dee, is everything all right? Everything's fine, Dad. You're calling on a Wednesday. I know. I just wanted to talk. A pause. Her father, a man who has spent 4 years learning to read the spaces in his daughter's sentences, says nothing and waits. I want to tell you something, she says. Okay? I'm okay here. I know you've been worried. I know you don't fully understand what happened and why I'm here, and I know I haven't explained it as well as I should have. She stops. I'm okay. I want you to know that. Silence. Doris, her father says. Dad, are you happy? She sits with this question. Looks out the window of the bedroom at the Seoul skyline. I don't know yet, she says honestly, but I think I might be getting there. Her father is quiet for a long time. Your mother used to say, he says finally, that happy is not a place you arrive at. It's a direction you start walking in. A pause. She said you know you're walking, right when the walking itself starts to feel like something. Doris doesn't speak for a moment. Does the walking feel like something? Her father asks. She thinks about the Korean textbook on page 94. the motorcycle, and the pojangmacha, the photograph in the east wing. The dish moved closer to her, without comment. Yeah, she says. It's starting to. Then keep walking, he says. She ends the call, sits for a moment in the direction her life is facing, then picks up the textbook. Page 95. Compound sentences. She gets to work.